Thank you very much indeed. I hope I'll be coherent in the sense we've just come from a meeting of 900 Superiors General. So it was a very large gathering and a very fruitful gathering. And I'm happy to talk with you about the whole area of abuse and, in a sense, the protection of minors and vulnerable adults. As the introduction said, I was present at the Vatican meeting. But let me say a little bit before I reflect on the meeting itself. I'm Irish, though I've been in Rome for nearly 20 years in various capacities. So in Ireland, as some of you may know, or all of you may know, we have been facing the whole question of institutional abuse. And that would have been abuse sexually, or physically, psychologically. And in a way, many of the abuses happened in institutions run by religious orders, either male religious orders or female religious orders. So orphanages, remand homes, and other types of institutions. And that would have happened at a time in Ireland when physical punishment was accepted, when children were to be seen and not heard, when we certainly were not aware of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But one of the learnings, and I say this to the members of religious orders today, is our behaviour in institutions is being judged today, our behaviour in the past is being judged by today's standards. So I say to the sisters today, your behaviour today will be judged by the standards of 30 years hence in your countries. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. That what may be acceptable now in terms of, say, physical punishment, certainly as cultures change, and cultures do change, practices that were previously accepted can become, in a sense, even at a legal level, not acceptable and outlawed. My own experience, before I came here to Rome, I was principal of a high school in a deprived area in Dublin. And in the early 80s, we set up an accompaniment or counselling facility in the school. And after 1 year, where I had two sisters who were trained counsellors and who did accompaniment work, sometimes I would say to my vice principal, please tell me I'm running a school and not a rape crisis centre. Because one of the things I discovered was when you made space for young people to speak, and secondly, in Ireland, we had introduced a relationships and sexuality programme, and I was on the National Commission that developed that programme. When you gave young people the language to talk about themselves, their bodies, their experiences, I would have to say the abuse at the level of the family, they had the language to speak about what was happening to them at the level of the family. So, if you like, with those experiences from my Irish context, in my current role as Executive Secretary of the International Union of Superiors General, we have 2,000 members. So they in turn are responsible probably for 500,000 religious sisters. It's a large number. I'm also concerned when I look at the statistics, the Vatican statistics, there are 10,000 orphanages under the care of the Catholic Church, and something like 37,000 what are called other institutions. Now, those other institutions are not schools or hospitals or clinics. They're other kinds of institutions. And I'm deeply concerned about the fact that they would say 80% of children in orphanages are not orphans. They have family members. They often have at least one parent, or they have an extended family. And in a way, in some countries, orphanages, there's two things happening. Orphanages are secure places, but also places that provide education and food. So a family may choose to in a sense, ask those who run the institution to take in their child because they see it as a provision for a better life. However, I'm deeply concerned that in 10 years, 20 years, someone who is in an orphanage may say, "You took me into your institution and you knew I had a family. You knew I had a family." Secondly, there is an orphanage industry. If you call an institution an orphanage, you're more likely to get funding. So it's one of the things I'm trying to sensitize the sisters to say we must name our institutions correctly. We ran a 2-day workshop here before our plenary, which was called From Institutional to Family-Based Care. There's a worldwide movement now to look at any kind of institutional care and see how that institution, no matter what it is, can be reconnected with the family or really work in partnership with the family. So that there may be, we talk now about a continuum of care. There may be a need at a particular stage for a child to be in residential care, but that should be the last option and should be for the shortest possible period. The normal place for a child to be should be in the family. Yes, we know there can be failures at family life, but the challenge is to build up the family, to support the family, to accompany the family, to train the family. So at the meeting, let me pass on and just say a few words because I have almost used my time. But I will answer any questions you want to afterwards. At the Vatican meeting, which was a meeting on the protection of minors and vulnerable adults, it was interesting because normally we as sisters, the usual meetings the Vatican holds are synods. And a synod, as you know, is a synod of bishops. And therefore, you have the bishop representatives from all over the world. You have the major superiors of men who automatically get places to a synod of bishops, because canonically they have the same status as a bishop. They're in charge of priests. So we as religious women, we're lay people like you. We're lay people, therefore we fall in the category called lay. And we may get, because we knock at the door a lot, we may get 3 places, but we will be told how to fill those places. For example, we want somebody, say for the Synod on Youth, they requested a sister from Africa of a certain age, and they requested a sister from Asia, from a particular country. So as Superiors General, we had 1 place at the Synod. Now I'm saying that because At the Vatican meeting, we were asked for the first time, who did we wish to bring? So that of itself was a change and a shift. So we said we would bring, like our counterparts, the Union of Superiors General, the men, leaders, we said we would bring our board and the executive secretary. So I think in total there were 14 women participating in the meeting, of which 10 were sisters. And of those who spoke, there were 9 speakers, and 3 of the speakers of the 9 were women. 2 laywomen, one a journalist, another was a sister, and the third was trained in the area. So, in a sense, you had the women, I think, made a contribution that was extremely striking at the actual meeting. I think that what remains with me is the 3 pillars on which the meeting was built, which was transparency, responsibility, and accountability. They were the 3 pillars of the meeting. And we had a day that focused on each of those. And they're the 3 principles that we now as UISG carry into our work. Transparency, responsibility, accountability. And those 3 principles are the principles we carry into every aspect of our work in terms of the protection of minors and also of vulnerable adults. And just maybe a few words to say, obviously as religious sisters, we have an enormous number of sisters involved in ministry to young people. So we cannot police this, but we are requesting every congregation to have clear guidelines and protocols. And also congregations are now beginning to prepare what are called codes of conduct for every member of the congregation. So there's an expected code of conduct that's very detailed, very explicit in terms of how they are to relate in ministry to others. And the other comment I would make before I finished is the workshops we hold, if you like, are to support the development of those guidelines, protocols, and codes of conduct. But we are also dealing with the matter of the abuse of vulnerable adults. And in many cases, sisters could fall into the category of vulnerable adults for a number of reasons, which I won't go into now, but sometimes it's the structure of the congregation itself. Sometimes it is the ministry of the sisters. Sometimes it's the lack of training. Sometimes it's due to poor formation. And sometimes it's due to the fact that sisters have already experienced abuse themselves in their families before entering religious life. And there can be a very poor understanding of the vow of obedience. The vow of obedience does not mean that you do what the cleric or the bishop requires of you. Right? So it's a matter that we, as an organisation, are paying great attention to. One of the steps we intend to take in the near future is to probably establish a commission called a Commission for the Care of Persons, which will look after many of the aspects I've talked to you about. The protection of minors, the protection of vulnerable adults, looking at any kind of institutional care that is still within the ambit of religious orders of women. So with those few words, I'll pass on to others who will come at the same topic from a different perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sister. We're so grateful for your sharing your testimony and your experience with us. It's most valuable in understanding this. Thank you. Our next speaker, Dr. Katharina Anna Fuchs, is an associate professor at the Institute of Psychology of the Pontifical Gregorian University, where her research and her concentration are in the safeguarding of minors. We very much look forward to her contribution to our understanding of this difficult topic. Dr. Katharina. Thank you.
And thank you very much for the invitation. Okay. 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 That one's okay. Closer. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure and honor for me to be here and to talk to you today about how we can create awareness and sensitivity worldwide, especially in the Catholic context, to prevent child sexual abuse. But not only, as we have heard only a few minutes ago, there are also vulnerable adults who are at risk. And what can we do to protect them better? So I have prepared some slides to underline my presentation. Well, what we see and hear very often in the church right now are quite different reactions. So some say, I feel so helpless about this situation. I do not know what to do. Others say, I'm afraid about this situation. I'm afraid about the church. But we also hear comments like, how can I avoid that a person I know I'm responsible for becomes a victim? Or I feel very sad for the damage a few of us who are part of the church have created. But also, how can I help an affected person? But on the other side, there are also comments like, I'm really tired of listening to all this. When will we have time to come back to other important issues? But I would say this is a very important issue, because this is about children, this is about young people, this is about adults, this is about the church, of course, but this is also about the world, this is about our future. It's about the future of mankind. So we already had a short introduction into the topic. You have heard about orphanages, you have heard about young people, about families, about the summit, but as it is a quite sensitive topic and it's not easy to deal with, I just would like to ask you to stop for 2 or 3 minutes and just to reflect for a moment, what does this topic tell me? What are my thoughts, my emotions, when I think about sexual abuse in the context of the Catholic Church and about victims and the consequences for victims, or also for the church as such, as a community or as an institution? Just take these 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm quite sure that your thoughts or your feelings are very similar. Are there 2 or 3 volunteers who would just like to share for a moment what comes to their mind? What do they feel when they think about a topic? There's no right or wrong. Yes.
Me llamo Edelma, soy de Cuba.
My name's Edelma. I work in the field of mission, and when we visit villages, this problem is there. I have to say that sexual abuse is a major issue in my country, and we also have sects. And so sexual abuse made within these sects is rather widespread. And Pope Francis really want this truth to be known. So if this problem is made known, we might avoid really bad situations and much suffering. So we must struggle so that these forms of abuse disappear. So we, for instance, in Cuba, we are working, but the government does not sometimes accept or support us, and we are also criticized for what we do. I am Argentinian, and I've got a family, and I have to say that so this happened to a member of my family, to a child in my family. So I was reflecting. So I live in Lyon diocese, where Monsignor, a bishop, was denounced because he hadn't reported abuses. So I wonder what is going on in our society. So even before being a priest, they are men, and they might have defects. So I am not saying that we have to find excuses for the suffering of these children and young people. So a society that accepts this reality is a wicked society, but we do not have to forget that priests are men, and they might have the very same weaknesses of a common man. So it's not an excuse, a justification for them, but we do not have to forget that they are men.
Well, voices and thoughts, but all go in the same direction. So that we are afraid that it may happen maybe to our children, that it may happen to children we are responsible for, and that is something that shouldn't be accepted. And it shouldn't be accepted neither in society at large, nor in the church, of course. And it's somehow our mission to do our best to make the world a safer place and a better place for children and for young people. So, as you are from various cultures and from various parts of the world, maybe you would say, well, child sexual abuse, it's not a topic in my culture, in my country. You know, some years ago, it was a topic in Northern America, like in Canada and the United States, where the first abuse cases came up in the 1980s, 1990s. Then it became, with other cases in Ireland, in the United Kingdom and Australia, it became an Anglophone problem. Later on, we discovered cases and scandals in Germany, in Austria, in Poland, and so on. Then it became a problem of the first world. But I can tell you, child sexual abuse, it's a worldwide problem. It's not a problem of one culture, of one society. It really appears in all cultures, all over the world. Maybe we still have a lack of data or of statistics from some parts, but it does not mean that there are no cases, there are no children, young people or adults affected by sexual abuse. And now very often it's also combined with other problems that are always related to the field of safeguarding. And here just to give you some examples, and I'm sure that at least 2 or 3 will also be present in your country or in your culture. Now, we have the problem of child labor in many countries, where very young children, especially boys, already have to work, but their body is not yet ready to do so. We have child marriage in many countries. A young girl at the age of 10 or 11 is forced to marry an elder man at the age of 40, 45 or 50. Of course, they will have sexual intercourse. So also this is a case of child sexual abuse, which is very often culturally accepted because it's part of the culture and it's part of the tradition and the norms and the beliefs in the culture. So people don't even see it as sexual abuse of minors. Then we have the issue of child protection in a digital world. I will show you in a few minutes a short video where children that are victims of sexual abuse in the digital world tell about their stories and how do they feel and what does it do to their life. So also this is really a huge problem, and we cannot even imagine the dimension of that issue. You know, the internet, all the social media, they help us a lot. We are connected with our friends, with our families worldwide. If we need an information, we don't have to go to the library, we just ask Google. But we know that there are also, apart from all the advantages and benefits, there are also many disadvantages and risks, especially for young people if they do not know how to use the internet and how to use the social media. They easily finish up maybe in a chat room, thinking they are chatting with another young person, a nice young boy, but in reality, it's an elder man at the age of 50 who is contacting that young girl. They send out pictures of them from holidays at the beach. You know, selfies are very popular amongst the young people, so they are not aware of all these risks. And also here, online, in the digital virtual world, children can be abused, also sexually, even if it's not a direct bodily contact. Then also child recruitment by armed forces, so child soldiers is a reality in many countries, but also children without parental care, that also you were mentioning before, children with disabilities, maybe with a physical or mental disability. Also, they are under the category of, well, also adults, of course, under vulnerable adults. So it's not only for children, but also for adults. Then very often, family separations in emergencies, like it happens for many migrants and refugees. Here we know that almost all of them have been traumatized and abused in the one or other way. Then female genital mutilation or cutting, which is still a reality in many countries. It's part of the tradition, it's part of the norms. But also this is about sexual abuse of minors. Gender-based violence, especially in emergencies. You know, also many religious women are at risk. but also women as such. Here in Italy at the moment, you can see many campaigns also in the metro station and in many buses about violence against women. So with a helpline, with a hotline and so on. It's about human trafficking. Okay. Which is a big issue. We know that worldwide, in 1 minute, about 4 people are trafficked. And you know, they will finish up very often in pornography, prostitution, and so on. So also human trafficking is very much related to sexual abuse, not only of minors, but also of adults. And it's one of the most, if not even the most lucrative business in the world. So if somebody wants to become rich, he needs to work in that field. The second most lucrative business is pornography. Only afterwards, weapons and drugs come. And then it's sexual violence against children as such. That may happen in families, but also in institutions like schools, like sport clubs, but also in the Catholic Church, as we know. So you see, just to give you an overview and to show you how sexual abuse is related to many, many other issues that may be related to your culture, to your country, and to the norms, the values, or the traditions there. As it can't be seen without seeing the culture. So it's also a very cultural sensitive issue. Okay, as I told you, I will show you now a short video with 5 testimonies who have become victims of sexual abuse in the digital world. Let's see what it works. No. Okay.
Hello, this is Charity from Nigeria, Abuja. I'm joining in the conversation. In this part of the world, there are many issues about child abuse. And we are also making a contribution. We are also looking at it. We are also making efforts to ensure that the girl child, especially, is not sexually abused. It's not just only in the church.
No, scusa. Era già aperta, era questo?
We live.
All my friends have boyfriends, but no one looks at me. I just wanted someone to talk to, someone to pay attention. When he first messaged me, he said he was friends with one of my friends. I didn't think to check. He was so cute, and he said I was beautiful. He said that I could be a model. When he asked for the first photo, I didn't want to do it. I know I shouldn't have sent it to him, but I wanted him to like me. I wanted him to keep messaging me. But when he asked for a photo of me naked, I knew it was wrong, and I said no at first. He called me a tease, said I was just like all the other girls, just leading him on. He made me feel so bad. I felt like I had to. Now he's saying he's going to post it everywhere. He's going to ruin me if I don't pay him. I'm such an idiot. I already gave him all the money I have, but he keeps asking for more. He's going to send those photos to everyone, to humiliate me. I can't believe I actually thought he liked me.
My mate told me how easy it was to make money off of selling. I'd put a post up with the right emojis everywhere online. Some people would message me and we'd meet up somewhere quiet, and boom, cash in my hand. I couldn't believe how easy it was. I finally felt like I had some freedom. But then I sold these pills to this girl, and she took too many. My mate tells me it's her own fault. I feel guilty all the time. Now I hate selling. I wish I could just stop. How can I get away from them? People keep messaging me, asking for more. It's just a matter of time before I get caught out. I'm so paranoid. I don't know who to trust. Who's watching me?
It started after I downloaded some game. These ads just started to pop up with these girls asking me if I wanted to chat. Girls don't usually talk to me that much, so I clicked and watched. It was pretty weird, but I kind of liked it. I watched another, and then another, and another. Now I watch them whenever I can. Watching it doesn't feel the same anymore. I keep thinking I'll find something new, something I haven't seen yet. I think about those girls all day. Why don't any of the girls my age look like this? I just can't stop. Sometimes I feel disgusted with myself.
People point, stare and swear at me and my family. Every day. I swear, if I got my hands on them, I'll kill them. I found my brothers in faith. Online. Now, we'll be the ones that make them scared. Go back home, they shout. Well, I am home. I know where my brothers are. This is my fight now.
Loser, idiot, ugly bitch. That's what they call me. They'd shout at me, push me around, pull my hair. But then it started online. They message me all day and all night on every app. I can't get away from them. I can't even post anything anymore because they'll comment awful things. Every time my phone vibrates, I get this pain in my chest. There's no escape. What's the point anyway? No one likes me. No one would care.
I slept through my test at school this morning. Who cares about any of it? I'd rather be doing something with my friends, like playing this game. The graphics are really awesome. It's like I'm actually there. I steal cars, kill people, blow stuff up. My mum says I should do sports, study more, but what's the point? I just want to play the game. Yeah, my grades aren't great, but I forget all that when I play. Why should I care? Why should I stop?
So this was a short video that was presented 1.5 years ago during a congress on child dignity in the digital world. And as these testimonies are quite strong, maybe we just take a few seconds to digest what we have heard. So I think what we have clearly seen is that it's not anymore just about physical contact. It's not anymore just about the person I know in the family, at school, in the parish who might abuse, but there is a huge risk online. So today, a child can even be abused at home on the sofa if the parents are not aware of this risk and if the parents are not educated in the correct use of the new media, of the social media, and are not able to help their children and to teach them how to use it. So this is a video that shows the immediate reaction and the short-term consequences on victims. But we know that, especially also in the church, many victims came forward only after years or even decades. And some of them even suffer and struggle for their whole life. So to show you how a sexual abuse can impact the life of a person, I would like to show you another short video where a very well-known victim from Ireland, Marie Collins, she was willing to talk to us, to the CCP, about her story and to produce this little video, really to show you what is the impact of sexual abuse, not only in the short term, but also on the life of a person, really to see and to hear also the long-term consequences. And I think this shows even better why it's so important to be aware and sensitive to this issue and to try whatever we can to prevent sexual abuse before it may happen, and if it has already happened, at least to intervene and to help the victims as soon as possible. Because the earlier a victim gets help, the better it is. And today there are so many really good therapies and cares out there that may help a victim to somehow overcome and to integrate the abuse in their own life in a few months or at least in 1 or 2 years. So it's not necessary to make them suffer for years, decades, or for their whole life.
I was a victim of clerical child sex abuse. It happened when I was 13. I was in hospital, quite sick, and away from my family for the first time. I was anxious and afraid, and very vulnerable. And this priest sexually assaulted me. Even though it's 50 years ago, I can never forget it. And its effect lasted my whole life. I was a very devoted Catholic. I just made my confirmation. And I believed priests were close to God, in the place of God. And this particular priest, he befriended me. He was young. He was only just out of the seminary. He began then to play games and be playful and pull down the clothes on my bed and things like that. But then he went on to actually interfere with me sexually. And I knew it was so wrong. Each night when this happened to me, after the priest had left, I prayed so hard that it wouldn't happen again, that he wouldn't do it again. But unfortunately, he did. He did. I left that hospital a very different child when I went into it. I became quite paranoid. And by the time I was 17, I was in need of medical help from my anxieties, and I started on antidepressants and sedatives and things like that. I'd spent 30 years of my life just struggling to get by day, not able to work, not able to have a career, not able to be a proper mother or wife. And then I got help. My abuser admitted his abuse, and I got some help. I got some therapy to deal with the abuse that had happened to me. And what I had seen as all those wasted years were behind me. Life was beginning for me. And I was able to enjoy it, and I was able to enjoy my family. But the more people understand about the terrible life effects that can happen to a child who's been abused, the psychological effects, how it affects the way they see themselves, how they relate to others, all that, people need to be aware of that. So for me, that's my reason for trying to speak and trying to help understanding of this whole horrible issue that is so widespread in our society.
So we see also here 30 years of her life, she was struggling, just trying to survive day by day. And as I said, we need to do everything we can to avoid that and to help them. And as also the second video has been quite challenging. And as I said before, it's not easy to digest. I would also propose we make a short break. It gives you the time to reflect a little bit and the translators to make a short pause.
Thank you. We'll now have a 3-minute break for our translators. And I think it's a good time that we can take to ponder this incredibly powerful message we've been hearing. Thank you.
Okay.
I would just like to mention while we're having our break that these are some of the countries that are connected to this presentation today. They're from the United Kingdom, from Nigeria, Indonesia, France, Lebanon, Spain, Argentina, Australia, and Mexico.
Hello? Yeah, where are you? Since that time? Are they still in the office by this time? So you should head.
Ask for your attention again as we continue. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. So what we have seen is, and what we already know, that in the past, many institutions, including the Catholic Church, did not deal with these issues, not at all, or at least not properly. And this led to big mistakes, ending up with failing in protecting children. And we have seen that on the life of these children and young people, it does not have only short-term effects. And we could say, well, the victims, they will come over it. They are still little children. In about 2 years, they will forget about it. It's not the case. They will not forget about it. And without help, they won't come over it. And that's why it's so important that we as adults, and I really would say that all adults worldwide should be aware of these issues and should try their very best to protect children better. What we hear very often, but I can tell you it's not true, and I already said at the beginning, it's not only a Western problem, it's not an Anglophone problem. It's not a problem of secularized societies. It's a problem of all societies and all cultures worldwide. And we find sexual abuse in all social classes. So we have victims in all social classes and we have perpetrators in all social classes. From time to time, we also hear, well, there is a law and it's forbidden in our culture. Also, this is not true. I think the examples I have given before show that more or less all cultures and all societies have their problems. They may be different, yes, but they have problems to protect children from sexual abuse or from any other kind of violence. And we also know this year we celebrate the 30th birthday of the Convention on the Rights of the Child of the United Nations. Here in 52 articles, they explain about their rights. Almost all countries worldwide, apart from the United States, have signed it. So on the paper, let's say children are safe, but we know that reality is quite different. So we also hear from time to time from members of the Catholic Church, well, it's worse in other institutions. That may also be true. As I said at the beginning, it's not a problem of the Catholic Church. We find sexual abuse in all societies and also in other religions. But we shouldn't say, well, here it's worse and they have the same problem. We should really take over our responsibility and should be accountable for that. So it's not the right thing to point with the finger, well, here it's worse. No, we are responsible for what is going on in this institution. There are many false accusations. I'll also hear from what we have heard from canon lawyers, from the CDF, is that more or less 90% of the cases that arrive in their offices are true. About 5% are false allegations, and the rest probably we will never know because the cases are too complicated, or maybe the perpetrator has already died or whatever. But if the cases arrive here in Rome at the CDF, about 90% of them are true and could be verified as abuse cases. Another thing that we often hear is that the media wants to destroy the church. Well, we know that not all newspapers, that not all media are with the church. We know that some are against the church. But here again, somehow, it may sound strange, but that's what we have realized over the last years. We also need the media to keep the attention on the topic on a certain level. Because otherwise, what happens? Maybe there is an article in a newspaper, everybody is aware of this issue for 2 or 3 days, Then something else happens in another part of the world and the attention drops down. Then it stays down, and then maybe some weeks later, the next hit. So really to keep that awareness on a certain level, we somehow also need the media to be aware of it and to keep the attention high. So to understand better what sexual abuse means, or what child maltreatment and such means, okay. Just some short definitions of the World Health Organization. They group sexual abuse under child maltreatment. And sexual abuse means sexual contact or exposure to sexual acts or materials. And as I said, this can happen with or without physical contact. Without physical contact, it's about all the cases that may happen in the digital world, like online exploitation, pornography, and so on. But there are also other types of abuse, like physical abuse, hitting, beating, or shaking children or young people, or emotional or psychological abuse, like threatening, insulting, or confining. Or for example, if I tell a person, well, you don't have any worth, you're so stupid, why are you there? You know, and if a little child hears that all the time, at a certain point, they will believe it and they will behave accordingly. Another form that we often forget is neglect. You know, like failing to, despite having the means to provide medical care, to go to the doctor or to the hospital if a child is ill, to send a child to school, to get some education, or shelter or other essentials need for the health and the well-being of a child. And maybe here's some cases that we hear very often also from our students from African countries, are the so-called child-needy families. For example, the parents are out for work, so very often young children, usually the oldest in the family at the age of 12, 13 or 14 years, has to take care of the younger ones, to prepare the meals, to look after them, to protect them. But a 13 or 14-year-old girl or boy is not ready to take over that responsibility. So this is not abuse, but it's neglect, and this is part of child maltreatment. Now, as we are focusing mainly on sexual abuse, just a short definition of the World Health Organization that explains what sexual abuse really means. So it is defined as the involvement of a child in sexual activity that he or she does not fully comprehend, so they do not really understand what it means, is unable to give informed consent to, or for which the child is not developmentally prepared, or else that violates the laws or social taboos of society. Children can be sexually abused by both adults or other children who are, by virtue of their age or stage of development, in a position of responsibility, trust, or power over the victim. So what is very important here in the first sentence is that the child does not really understand what he or she is consenting to. So what, for example, a sexual relationship or sexual intercourse really means. Or if we think about the online world, what may happen to the photos I'm posting, I'm sending, or naked photos I'm sending to a stranger who is asking for them. So they cannot really understand what it means. The other important aspect is the taboo in society. So we know that in almost all societies, it's a taboo to talk about sexuality as such, as part of our human life. So it's even more difficult to talk about the negative side, about sexual violence and sexual abuse. So very often, the child has no idea about all these things. For lack of education, and awareness in society. And then in the second sentence, I have put bold two words, this trust and power. Because sexual abuse, it's not just about a sexual transgression, it's also about the abuse of power, because the abuser is elder, is stronger, is in a position of power, has authority over the child or the young person. And it's also an abuse of trust, because usually the child trusts that person, like a member of the family, the father or the uncle or the grandfather. But it's very often there's a trustful relationship towards the teacher, towards the sports trainer, towards the priest in the parish, and so on. So it's also important to know that it's not only the transgression itself, but it's also abuse of power and abuse of trust. And here's some data, not too many, but just to give you an idea how many children worldwide are affected by the various kinds of child maltreatment. For physical abuse, the past year, according to the World Health Organization, about 23% have been affected. So almost 1/4.
I'm doing the conference from my office.
Regarding emotional or psychological abuse, more than 1/3, namely 36%. For physical neglect, 10%. And for sexual abuse, 26% altogether. And if we divide boys and girls, about 18% of the girls and 8% of the boys. So that means if we go out on the street and start to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the girls, and from 1 till 10 or 12 for the boys. So that means also in one school class, we have about 3 to 5 victims only of sexual abuse, without including emotional, physical abuse or neglect. And these are the official data. So we really think this is not an issue we can say, well, it doesn't affect us. It's really a huge issue. And I think we all should try to be aware of and to try our very best to prevent it from happening. As we have seen, what is the impact of the life on the life of not only a young person, but also an adult who has suffered from sexual abuse. Okay. So these are some general informations. And now Ines Frank from Argentina, she will present to you online what they are doing concretely in their diocese. So to have a concrete example from one diocese in one place in the world.
Thank you so much. That was so beautifully done. We appreciate it very much, your sharing this with us. And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce Maria Inés Frank, a member of the Pastoral Council for the Protection of Minors for the Conference of Catholic Bishops in Argentina. Attorney Frank comes to us with degrees in political science, social teaching of the Church, as well as law degrees in canon law. We are pleased to present to you now Attorney Maria Inés Frank.
Buenas tardes, ¿cómo están? ¿Me escuchan bien así? ¿Sale bien el sonido?
Oh, good afternoon. Can you hear me while she's saying? Well, but maybe it's not easy to understand what she's saying. Donc, est-ce que vous pouvez entendre? C'est elle qui le dit. Thanks for inviting me. And thanks for inviting me. And it is a joy for me to be here with you and to speak about this subject. Évidemment, je vais vous parler de notre expérience en Argentine. I work in the capital, just very close to the capital, and I live in Buenos Aires. And every week I have to go to the town because the bishop just created a commission for minors protection. So this commission was established in 2017, and I have been working in this commission since then. The diocese just created a first commission of this kind in Argentina, and the commission is in charge of the protection of minors. So there are 3 lay people, a psychologist and a lawyer, and myself. I am the coordinator of this commission. So what are the goals of this commission? First of all, enable adults working within the church, and also the aim is to enable adults to find out the various forms of abuses, and also to find ways to help these people. We try, first of all, to understand how to talk to a child that confesses being a victim of abuses. We try to understand the indicators that might be present. That is, how to understand if a child is or was a victim of an abuse. What are the signs? How can we try to understand who are the perpetrators? So we have really we have to work on different levels. Obviously, we have to find a certain number of people who should work with us. But I have to also to say that there is no awareness among people, even among those that are in parishes, or there is no awareness in schools. That is why we also have to work in order to raise awareness, because adults are responsible for that. We have to say that we also were surprised when we found out what reality is like, and today we are working with 500 people from different parts of society. And so we work not only with people within the church, but also with people outside the church. Obviously, we work with the universities, with the students, and many students just follow the courses that we provide on these subjects. So there are lots of people who want to participate, and we are providing courses in order to just raise awareness how to be able to recognize a case of abuse and to treat a case of abuse. And obviously, this implies a sort of obligation to report cases to the authorities. So we have to feel obliged to report cases of abuses, and we are all aware of this responsibility. And then there is another question, that is accompaniment for the victims, and also accompaniment also for those who committed the crime, the perpetrators, because the perpetrators too need to be accompanied. They have to be reported, but also accompanied. Sometimes these people don't want to be accompanied by the church. So this is a very difficult task. We have to approach these people. First of all, we must say, well, we don't want a bit to invade a bit your lives. Sometimes there is a certain mistrust with respect to the church. So we tried to develop a strategy. This is among the first things that were made by the Commission. First of all, we decided to use mass media, so we exploited a bit the digital world, and that in order to make ourselves known. So we also know the social networks, and we are present online. And that has been of paramount importance in order to act, in order to make our work effective. And then there is another question. There are some compulsory norms. There is we could say something that we have to do. We have tried to give guidelines beyond the canon law. That is, we have tried just to define ways in which we have to react to given situations. So, for instance, we have provided telephone numbers and people that have always to answer the calls, so that there can be an immediate reaction, because the presence of a person is important with children, and also the presence of a perpetrator is very dangerous among people. Then we have tried to understand what a priest and seminarians should do, and so we try to work also with the seminarians and priests. And for instance, sometimes priests are not welcomed by the population. So we try to talk to them. We try to provide them with appropriate formation. We try also to establish dialogue, not only with people for which we work, but also with priests. So they should be heard. They have also to share the suffering that is there. And also there are many lay people and priests that call us and with whom we have established specific relations. Obviously, we are in touch with the Archbishop, and we also wrote a book about this topic, and it is a tool for us. This book is very important. We use it, and it is also used by other people. It is available to the general public. Then another point that is also very important, because this is a very complex issue, and we have to consider that from different standpoints. I am referring to the government that didn't trust the church. That is why we had to present our activities. And obviously, if we want to treat these a network, we have to work with the authorities. If we really want to put the prevention into place, we have to work together with other institutions. So communication tools are very important. And obviously, there are communication tools that really helped us to find out the cases of abuses and to act. So, for instance, we are in touch with journalists, and when working with journalists, we see that there are people with whom we can have a dialogue. And it was rather good. Then in the institutions, universities, movements, schools, these are all institutions with which we work. We also organize courses to enable people, to train people. Well, there is the theme of abuses on the internet. That is another question that we try to consider, and young people really appreciated that. And here again, we are in dialogue with the victims and the families of the victims, even though that was rather difficult sometimes. Even the church is very much concerned with this question. So we have tried to face this question, starting from the fact that all the members of the church just belong to a same class. That is, there is not a first class members or second class members within the church. And the victims of abuses are part of this family, of the church family. And other dioceses call us because obviously we represent the only commission of such kind in Argentina. So there is a council that is created by the Episcopal Conference, but we represent the only commission working at a local level. I just sent some material that we might share, and I think that this material just contains all the challenges that we have met. So the work is a huge work, I have to say that. We have to act soon. There are no free days, because when there is a call, when there is an emergency, we have to react immediately. So if someone wants to talk to us, we have to be available, we have to be there. So it's a huge work throughout the year. But I do that with a great love for the church, great love for the people of God, because I suffer for those who suffer. And one of the challenges I met to the commissioned, so as also to have a professional attitude. That is, people being capable of working in given situations and that want to do that. And this is a major difficulty at the level of dioceses. That is how to find the members. Then another challenge is that we have to deal with the victims, with the people, with the perpetrators. And then we have also to deal with the bishops and the state. So there is a team. This is a teamwork, and we have a permanent link, a permanent connection. So it is not enough to have protocols or codes of conduct. It is not enough to have a web page, but we really have to work concretely. We have to be there. We have to work with the priests, with the seminarians, parents, teachers, and so on and so forth. And we have really to be aware that this is a mission and that people can really count on us. Well, these are our major objectives. Then there are initiatives. I don't think that it is only the diocese that suffered because of abuses. The whole church just was really hurt by cases of sexual abuse throughout the world. So we have to re-establish trust in the church, and that is important because this trust has been lost. And in order to do that, obviously we have to work at different levels. So that the victims might really talk to us. I'm sorry, I can't go on. Unfortunately, the sound is not good. The sound is not good in this moment. It's possible to translate. So we have to follow with the commitment. So this is what I wanted to share with you, and it is a great pleasure for me. Thanks a lot.
Not just to help the victims, but also to preclude this from occurring in the future and to cure our hurt in our church. At this time, we can open the floor for questions from our speakers. We'd be grateful for that. I'm sure your minds, like mine, are so busy processing all of the information that we've received today, which is so stunning. And though we're probably very familiar with some of it, it hurts every time you hear it. So our hearts are hurting too. So take a moment, think of some good comments and questions, please. And I'm sure our speakers would be very delighted to speak with you. Yes, Virginie.
Virginie Roteil, je suis France et je suis représentante internationale pour l'UMOFC à l'UNESCO. Alors, il y a deux questions pour Madame Fuchs. J'aurais voulu savoir, lorsque vous avez fait votre petit topo sur les violences pour les enfants, vous aviez parlé, vous aviez mis toutes les violences qui étaient faites au sein de la famille, et puis des violences psychologiques, mais pas de violence par rapport au divorce. Que dans les familles, les enfants souffrent quand même beaucoup du divorce et c'est une violence psychologique. Alors, est-ce que c'est mis dans un autre registre ou voilà, c'est pas considéré comme une violence? Et ma deuxième question, c'est aussi comment fait-on avec tous les textes onusiens qui préconisent une éducation à la sexualité?
I'm sorry, it was off. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She's saying that maybe no mention has been made of the violence that follows divorce, because divorce is a form of violence for the child. But among the various forms of abuse, that form hasn't been mentioned, and why? The divorce of parents representing a form of violence for the child. Well, and the second question, so we represent UMOFC, the WUCWO, in international organizations, and I have to say that on sexual education is not mentioned. So sexual education it should start at the age of 12, and this education is made by adults. So how can we solve this problem of sexual education that is provided by adults?
Well, I mentioned it before briefly. You know, to talk about sexuality, it's still a taboo in many societies and cultures. And on the other hand, it's so important for young children to understand what does sexuality mean, especially if they are at the age and puberty starts, because otherwise they are not aware that all these changes that go on in their body are quite normal and that every young person has to go through this process. So at this point, it's quite easy for perpetrators or abusers to come in and to tell them, well, this is about sexual education, this is what all adults do, and try to threaten them. So therefore, you are absolutely right. Sexual education is very important, and I would say it should start in any case before a child enters into puberty. Whether this age can be fixed like you proposed at the age of 12, it's a bit more difficult, because what we know from many studies is that children today very often enter into puberty already at the age of 9 or 10. So here many discussions are going on. What is the right age to start? Should it be at home by the parents? Should it be in school? Should it be at home and in school? Well, also here I would say the ideal would be if it would happen in school, but also at home. And that these two positions won't contradict, so that they would hear one thing at school and another thing at home, or even nothing. regarding the age, well, maybe as we know that puberty today starts often at the age of 9 or 10, we also have to think about whether we need to start before the age of 12. But this is a very important question, and also here there is no answer that would be valid for all cultures and societies, because how can we speak about these issues if you can use, for example, the term sexuality in one culture? Or if you cannot mention 30 parts of the human body. So also here from time to time, we need to be quite creative. You know, maybe to find other words or other descriptions that we can use that the young people will understand in order to educate them. For example, I know one religious sister, she's working in Zambia with young girls at a school, and to find out whether somebody has abused them, but she cannot use the word sexual or sexuality and abuse. So she asked them whether somebody did foolish things with them, and they understand immediately what she's talking about. So also this needs to be decided somehow according to the culture, but of course sexual education needs to happen. How it may look like, it's a bit the same as with many other questions related to our working field. It's not enough just to adapt or to use one model that works in one country or one culture and to implement it to the other one. We need to translate it not only in a verbal sense, but also culturally, and it needs to be adapted. And this is somehow a work that cannot be done only in one place. This really needs to be discussed within the culture and needs to be decided according to the culture and the society there. I hope this answers your question.
Excusez-moi, je n'avais pas dit 12 ans, j'avais dit 2 ans.
So she didn't say 12 years, she said 2 years. I just didn't get the right number. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. She said 2 years. I said I understood 12 years.
From my own experience in Ireland, the relationships and sexuality program that was developed there was developed at national level.
You drive
with
into this place.
input of obviously teachers, but also of parents and other stakeholders in society. In other words, it was worked out together in over a number of years in a very collaborative way. So there was obviously a national agreement that this was, and the type of program that would begin from 4 years of age in school, which would also be supported by education in the family. So I think it does need a wider debate, a national debate, in order to come up with the kind of agreement and the guidelines that are helpful. And then maybe I should say that the training to deliver such a program is essential. That equally, both parents, I mean, one of the discoveries, in a sense, we knew it, but that many parents are reticent in speaking about sexuality with their children. Or many teachers really felt uncomfortable in delivering such lessons without proper training and proper education.
Thank you. We also have a comment coming from Attorney Inez to us on this subject.
Visits.
Bien, sobre justamente.
Moi, je suis perturbée par cette...
Well, I am really... Well, now I have considering the question of sexual education And well, we have first of all to know what is the situation of a child going to school, but the question of sexual education is not just referred to the sexual dimension, but it concerns many other aspects of the person. For instance, it has to deal with the body, and this is a form of education that has to start since the birth of a child. That is why parents are in charge of this sexual education, because it has something to do with the body, with many forms, many dimensions. And so prevention is also important. And what parents say to the child is very important, because the child has to develop certain attitudes, such as the capacity of communicating himself, the awareness of his own body. Obviously, these cannot prevent sexual abuse, but in case of sexual abuse, the child has already got some tools that might help him reject the abuse, that might just help him to express himself, to say something.
One became an adjective and one became an
So the child can react against these violence. So this is not a sort of a specific prevention. So it is really a form of education of the child.
Yes, because I almost got because my first vice, second vice.
Moi, je suis un peu perturbé par ce que l'autre.
Because I was watching the prizes and the prizes.
So I want to refer to the lady who just suffered for 30 years. Why did she wait these 30 years? That happened when she was 13 at a hospital. Why didn't she inform the doctor that there was a man going, a priest going to his room every night? So I'm really troubled by that, because every night there was that priest into his room. So maybe the second time she should have informed the doctor following her. So why didn't she do that in order to prevent that? So that was months long. She suffered 30 years, and she talks about that now. I really can't understand why she didn't react from the start. So we have to educate families. Families must be trained so that families might educate their children, and they have to speak about sexuality when they are just children, small children, babies. And so the Catholic women have work to be done, because all families should talk about sexuality.
First of all, we have to go back. You know, Marie came forward a couple of years ago, but the abuse already happened, as you said correctly, when she was 13 years old. You know, at that time, if she as a little girl would have accused a young priest of abusing her, probably nobody would have believed her. You know, because she's a young girl. There's the priest with his reputation, seen as a very high position. People had very good images of a priest. Nobody could even imagine at that time that a priest would do something like that. The other thing is probably when it happened first to her and many other victims, you know, it's like a shock. And when you are shocked, and this is not only true for sexual abuse, but also for other traumatizing events, you are like frozen. You don't even realize what is happening to you. You don't know what to do, how to react. So, and then later on, maybe also issues of shame, sense of guilt, and so on came in, because abusers are very good in manipulating their victims. You know, like, well, this is what every adult do with a young girl or with a young boy. This is just about sexual education. This is a secret amongst us. You liked it as well. You have come to me. You know, they are very good in these things. So at the end, the victims, they feel ashamed and they feel guilty. And then it's even worse and more difficult for them to come forward. But it was mainly also about, especially in that time, but even today, many say, well, who will believe me? Who will listen to me? You know, and that's why it's so important to be aware and to be sensitive. So if you have any suspicion, maybe to look twice, to listen better to them, maybe to be there for these young people if they feel the need to talk, or if you have the suspicion that something is going on. But we really have to overcome this taboo and to be aware that sexual abuse is something that happens to them. And then if we are in a position where we should listen to them, we should believe them, and we shouldn't blame them. But at that time, it was even more difficult for her.
One of the most moving testimonies during the Vatican meeting was a testimony by an Italian woman who only spoke about her abuse after 40 years. And she would have talked about her deep sense of shame, her feeling that somehow she was the responsible one, not the perpetrator. And the first time she spoke, in the sense, 40 years it took for her to speak outside of her family circle. She did tell her husband in the early part of her life, and he used that fact as a reason for getting a divorce. So she felt doubly victimized. And her testimony at the meeting, I truly believe, changed the opinion of many of the bishops who were listening. Because many who were inclined to say, well, we don't have that problem in my diocese or in my part of the world, when they realize that it takes so long to speak, because many factors need to be in place before you can.
And she cannot hear what we are
Society has to be ready to hear and to acknowledge that such a problem exists. We have to begin that there's a safe enough environment that you feel you will be believed, and also that you have enough courage to confront what has happened to you as a child and wounded you for life. And also that, in a sense, you're strong enough to face your perpetrator. So there are many factors that, if you like, prevent somebody from speaking. And often many victims would say it's something they just want to ignore and to try and live through. But this particular testimony and the testimony of several others were extremely significant in convincing the bishops present that this area, that the whole, if you like, the questions can remain hidden for so many years.
This is such an important, impactful topic that I'm sure we could discuss it all evening, but our day comes to a close and we must close this session, I'm sorry to say, but not without expressing our gratitude to these most generous contributors for sharing their incredible knowledge with us. We're so very grateful. Thank you so much. Sister Patricia Murphy, Dr. Katrina Fuchs, and Attorney Maria Inez Frank. Thank you so much.
Espero que al viajar a Argentina también pueda felicitar en forma personal a Marinés Frank y llevarle unas lindas flores como estamos ofreciendo acá.
Maria Ines, Frank, thank you to all of you. So thanks to all the people. So see you tomorrow. If you can come 8:30. So thanks to the interpreters, to the technician, and see you tomorrow 8:30. Thank you.
Paola, sei fretta perché io ci metto molto tempo e prendo qui 280
E poi, ma poi sono talmente lontana con la macchina che si aspetta mezz'ora perché l'ho parcheggiata, sì, però sono veramente lontana. Va bene, senti, a domani alle 8:30.